So thank you. Thank you, Mobile Korea Week, and also Professor Chang personally for inviting me again to speak in this elite conference, and also a congratulation for, like every year, to have such a global and world-class turn-up. And may I say one thing, in a world which is getting increasingly divided, also that we have in this event representation from Japan, from China, from India, from Europe, and from the US. Of course, next to the host country here is really also a good sign, and something which is very, very important to have. I'm also happy with the slot that I'm having, sort of being the last before the closing panel discussion. And I have been here also, I said, last year. So I thought when preparing, this was my presentation last year, so you don't need to get to all the slides, but the point is that I had been reflecting what has been the progress which we have been making from 1 year to this year now, and what is sort of the key demarcation, and taking the presentation a bit like on that, and of course to reflect what I've heard, like you have heard, also throughout the day, in particular, also in the last session from my esteemed colleague Weng Tong and Magnus Everving. And I will probably complement that as I'm kind of leading our standard and industry activities. So one slide which has been in different iteration, you saw this from the Ericsson video and from the GSMA presentation. The point of this slide is, maybe we are a little bit, as an industry, we have been a little bit too negative about talking about 5G, right? So this slide shows simply the uptake. It's a GSMA intelligence slide of 5G in terms of subscriber, and of course, with respect to that, it is the fastest uptaking technology. You could also use other parameters to say that. But I think we have been, maybe to motivate your next journey, the next car, the next generation. Of course, you talk what is better than before, and sometimes maybe we have been overemphasizing that, maybe also, especially in the research area, that we say, let's make everything better than before, and maybe have thrown a little bit the last generation under the bus more than we should have done. This is also a GSMA slide. I like it very much. It shows, it is some GSMA index. It shows the 5G maturity, combination of penetration, moving from NSA to standalone devices, advanced services, usage of RedCap, and so on. And the tier 1 is Finland, of course, the most important country, but then China, the US, and then, of course, Korea, and some small countries like UAE and Norway, and so on. But then there is a larger area like most of Europe and also the Middle East, which is in the second tier. And it is fair to assume that those countries which are in the first tier are likely to be the first to deploy 6G. 2018 was the Winter Olympic in Pyeongchang. 2028, we have another Olympic. And I bet some money that we will see a more mature version of 6G in Los Angeles than what we have seen in Pyeongchang in 5G. And I see some clear evidence in US to go that way. So that's a good sign. Where we stand in terms of the standardization, this slide I only want to discuss two things. One is the endpoint, which I kind of mentioned already a little bit. So the endpoint is that the day 1 of 6G deployment we expect around the turn of the decade. So I mentioned the ambition the US demonstrates around showcasing something in 2028. But beside this, maybe a bit more political demonstration, I see clear signs in some of these black countries in the slide before to go to the day 1 of 6G at that time. Of course, that gives us a firm timeline for the standardization. So in my perspective, I overlook the standardization journey for our company. And then if I look to the further part, we had the workshop in Incheon in March, which really kicked off 3GPP. And since then, we have started the studies. So when we meet under the kind invitation for Professor Chang in December next year, the main decisions on 6G will have been done. The main decisions on 6G will have been done in a year. So it is really crucial. And we have done pretty good progress already. So for example, Prague in 2 weeks ago, we were we were agreeing the channel coding, and my colleague Wen Tong knows from 5G how difficult it was for Huawei to accept that we were using LDPC, and with the discussion we had with China at this point in time. So this is a fantastic progress. Why is that important? Because we need a solid base for the implementation now in the hardware, because the hardware that we ship maybe next year is the hardware that will support then the software of 6G, because we want to install 6G on the existing grid without hardware upgrade. For that we need to have some clarity in the R&D. That is very, very important. I think number of times also by Magnus was mentioned that how important it is that we use one single simplified architecture with a standalone. And I think there is not a firm decision, but already quite some consensus on that. We have seen also some communication around the 6G vision. What we have been emphasizing, not only our company, but also others, a bit more is this term of 6G day one. It is sort of a deliberate demarcation from the vision, which is this ITU IMT 2030 demarcation, this depiction, to, hey, this is what we might expect being rolled out in 2030. And again, as an industry, I think we have done not a good service in that 10 years ago. I think in 10 years ago, we made believe it is like Jesus Christ. In 2020, you turn on 5G and blind can see and lame could walk. And that did not happen. And that, because that did not happen, and that means this URLSC and industry automation. That did not happen at the day one, but we all knew it here in this room, but maybe we have not communicated it a lot. I've heard a number of industry observers who were at the workshop this year, who were quite positively surprised by this sort of more down-to-earth views. Because the workshop, of course, it really was, what does Nokia, what does Huawei, what does Ericsson, what does KT, SKT, what does everybody think about their priority for 6G? What are we now working on? Not what are we demanding, what are we researching, what are we working on? And I think this was a good sign. So you can, if you look at this wheel, you can easily, of course, also see things which are not mentioning. Yeah, you could see why is there no ISAC? Why is there not hyper reliable, low latency service? Why is there not this and this? So this is a bit more of a commercial judgment, and it may be that ISAC is a day one feature, but at the moment I think that is probably the one of the day one vision journeys. So we have, of course, to make sure that we have the wider view inside, but we have to have a journey which is realistic. And as an industry, I'm looking also as our bodies. It's the time now to get from a dialogue which satisfied people who give money for research into some expectation that what is happening then when we deploy this. As we drive standardization, I think we were talking a lot about being faster and better in the standardization. So this is now a little bit nerdy standard slide. Of course, also the way that we are operating in the standardization process must be better. So we have been driving as a community. It's not finalized yet, but that we have to update our way of working. I'm not only talking really about AI as a mega trend and what all happens, but then says, oh wow, our experts are so familiar with Word and implementing by third people change requests into some document which a fourth people then reads in Nokia to implement it into the product. That has to be automated, and we have spent quite some effort starting after the pandemic, but more needs to be done, and we have to do it now. On the radio side, we will always do clean slate of specification, like we did in 4G and 5G, and that happens after the study. So all the changes that we think, for example, going from Word away to Markdown, we have to complete there. So it may be a little bit of a detail, but it shows also us as a community, we have to become more agile, more efficient, and enabling an automated process in our machinery, research and standard, but also, of course, towards the product R&D. These are slides which we have been showing before, two slides, one on the architecture and one on the radio, on the 6G design. And let me not go through this, but only on two aspects to reflect also what I heard before. So the single architecture is standalone. I think, and there seems to be quite some consensus that what we did in 5G with non-standalone and standalone may not have served us as an industry. Indeed, I just had a corridor discussion with one of our esteemed Korean customers who had also that view. And when I look at Korea, I think that one operator is now at standalone, where two others are still predominantly on non-standalone. And it is a difficult investment and all that. So I think this is something that probably, at least on the vendor community and hopefully also with most of the operator, there is a consensus that let's do it simple, let's do only 6G radio, 6G network. Then the question is, how does the 6G network look like? So we've heard Ericsson, which had a view very much on, driven out of the difficulties we see to invest by many operators from the NSA network to the standalone network, where of course now we have to tell those customers, invest into standalone because that investment is safe, obviously. Then we have to make clear that what they are doing now in 25, in 26 to really invest into the 5G core network is what will stay when they move maybe in 31, 32 to 6G. Maybe with some, in our case we would formulate it slightly a little bit more advanced than in those material, but similar. That of course we need to do some mandatory modification that makes sure that the new design is still then safe for the next decade. So there might be cybersecurity threats. So there might be a number of reasons where we have to tell, yes, we understand that you made this investment, but you still need to have now a little bit additional investment. And of course we saw some others, like our colleague Van Tong, arguing for a very radical design. Which of course takes a lot of future benefit. That is, when I look at where we stand with standardization, probably one of the biggest dispute. You saw that also when you analyzed all the input paper that were presented in the 3GPP workshop. That is the biggest point still where the industry is diverging quite a lot. And if we say we want one global standard, I think we have to, as an industry, come to a solution there. Otherwise, we get a fragmentation, maybe not on the radio, but maybe on the network. And as I said, where we stand on that, when we meet here in a year, we will see whether we have achieved that or not. That will be part of the architectural discussion. On the radio, let me go over that. So, of course, it's key important that we need, from the standardization, enable the AI word. We also believe that the upcoming AI traffic based on the data center build-up and the AI application will be fueling very much the traffic. But of course, we have to make sure, maybe better than we did on the video part, which was the streaming basically went outside of the operator mobile community in terms of value creation. And I think there is a clear interest to do better with the AI wave in networks. Of course, we have to make sure that we expose the data so that operators can monetize, that we have a right framework of how we do the life cycle management for the data and the AIs. And my last element is also the spectrum. So this is a discussion again of these different bands, and the dark blue is where we see a new blend. So one thing which I guess hasn't discussed by many others is, yes, in some regions, maybe not necessarily in Korea, we also see that there is still some chunk of UHF band to gain. And of course, where we can that is also the transition from terrestrial broadcast. Where we can do that, we should do that. I know in many countries where this is still allocated, there is a regulatory framework which makes this reallocation a bit difficult. But it is like a prime real estate where you have a parking lot on, so to speak. Yeah. So I encourage all of us to do that discussion with the administration, because of course this large band, be it in the 600, be it somewhere in the 700, would allow us a nice countrywide coverage band, in where others are maybe discussing some non-terrestrial component. I'm not dismissing the non-terrestrial component, but I think we should pay more attention about where we can, about the potential of UHF. I've heard some administration talking about even some national infrastructure, because it allows countrywide coverage and it is good for network sharing or even a public deployed network. And then of course the big high bands. We have looked here, this is a bit busy slide, we have looked here, and I'm happy to get any update on this slide. It's only our view on these different bands from, I have to look myself, 2.7 CBRS and around 4, and then the upper part of 6 gigahertz in orange and 7 to 8 in purple. So we have looked at this throughout the different regions and compared this with the claim that we have and the expectation that we have. I think, was it Juho who said this in the morning? The GSA has said it, the GSMA has said it. So to have a good 6G services, we expect additional 400 megahertz of continuous service per operators. And if we assume like a typical 3 national operator per country scenario, this leads us to this 1,200 bar, which is this top bar. And then if you see where you can achieve this and look at the big countries, yes, India, Magnus also mentioned that looks good, because they are considering both 6 gigahertz as well as 7 to 8, 4, but in many it looks a bit challenging, right? So I think this is a call to all of us here to also push our administration that what we all hear in terms of supporting research, supporting a good 6G leadership in different regions. We hear this all over, but of course it needs to be undermined with spectrum assets. So no surprise, I'm from Europe, where I think there is quite a strong discrepancy between the expectation and all the funding that Colin Wilcock mentioned on the research and how scenario could look like in the spectrum. So with that, I would like to first thank you for the attention. And I believe if we continue to work together, we can lead jointly for a successful 6G. Thank you very much.